everyone, so for today I will be discussing a book that helped define an entire genre in and of itself, and that is none other than Morlock Night by K.W. Jeter. This book helped to, it was one of the major influences in defining the steampunk genre as we know it today. And if you're wondering, what is steampunk? Well, let me tell you. Steampunk is essentially it's under the science fiction umbrella. It is usually a story set in a neo-futuristic Victorian England or the United States Wild West, sometime back in those two similar time periods, and it involves steam-powered machinery. It's sort of like a look into this parallel idea or this alternate idea of what if the Victorian era or the Wild West had some kind of technology, and what would it look like today? If you've seen Arcane or have played Bioshock, these are two very good examples of modern day steampunk aesthetic. If you have heard of Jules Verne, author of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days, or H.G. Wells, who wrote The Time Machine, or even Robert Louis Stevenson with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. These were all heavy influences in what we know as steampunk in the modern context. So with that little history out of the way, I will be most likely getting into a video series later on my channel talking about different genres, a deep dive, so to speak, into genres that interest me, steampunk being one of them. I will be including spoilers in this as usual. So the book came out in the 1970s, but it is rather niche, so I recommend going and checking it out before coming back here, and then we can engage further in the discussion. So Morlock Night by K.W. Jeter is one of the first kind of formally official works of steampunk that we had. It was written and came out in 1979, and essentially K.W. Jeter was joking around in a letter with Tim Powers, who wrote the Anubis Gates and also, fun fact, Stranger Tides, Parts of the Caribbean, and James Blaylock, who is another modern day steampunk writer that I have kind of delved into myself. Both really interesting authors. So anyway, K.W. Jeter was joking around and used the term steampunk to define what these men were essentially writing about, like the type of genre that they were writing about. They were mixing what you would call cyberpunk, like kind of science fiction, with these older like settings like Victorian era, or like Tim Powers wrote The Anubis Gates, which includes a lot of Egyptian mythology. I haven't read it. I think there's even excerpts set in the past in ancient Egypt. So mixing kind of those ideas, steampunk was born. And Morlock Night specifically is set in the year 1892 in a fictional version of Victorian London. Our main character, Edwin Hawker, is walking home on a dreary, cloudy Victorian night. Kind of a Dickensian feel that this novel opens with. It's a very kind of like dreary, it gives like very dreary Dickensian vibes in the beginning. Dreary again. And he realizes that there's a stranger next to him, a pale man talking to him who he didn't realize was there before and mysteriously appeared. And our character specifically, he's walking home from a conference in which this other mysterious man, who we don't actually meet, we just hear about him in the beginning, has claimed to have found or invented a time machine and is warning that the Morlocks could come back. H.G. Wells is named in the beginning of this novel, so it's unclear if this man is a character version of H.G. Wells himself, or if he's someone that was inspired by H.G. Wells. And our main character walking home now is skeptical until this mysterious, odd man tells him that there is a prophecy in which the Morlocks will come back and take over and eventually destroy the world. For a bit more context, this is kind of an alternative extension of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. There are these creatures called Morlocks that are mentioned. They're kind of the bad guys in that novel, and they're these beastly alien-like creatures. And this explores the idea of what if those creatures in that novel actually did get their hands on the time machine.
I gotta catch a glimpse of these warlocks.
The pale man tells Edwin that 3 years later, in the year 1895, they will come back. And he's like, that's absurd, but he's also a little bit shaken. And one day he does wake up to find that London has been destroyed and the Morlocks are here. Along the way, we meet a few other characters, one of which is a woman who is disguising herself as a man.
Does he look like a
I don't remember her name exactly. I think it's like a one name, like she only has a first name, but she's a really cool character. She kind of helps to guide Edwin through this world. Edwin has a military background. He's also a learned man, so he's very tactical in this setting, but he's also out of his depth because he doesn't believe or didn't believe that this was at all possible. We meet a man who is a bit mysterious and come to find that he claims to be a reincarnation of, wait for it, Merlin the magician from the King Arthur tales. And Merlin is searching for King Arthur, a reincarnation of King Arthur, in order to revive him so that he can defeat the Morlocks and save the world, as it is also prophesized. This book is pretty wacky. In 200 pages, there's a lot going on. So I had a fun time reading this. And there's some twists along the way that our main character comes across. Like, for example, and again, this is a spoiler, he finds that the man who is King Arthur's decoy is not in fact King Arthur, but there's another person who he knows pretty well that is actually that same man. That's all I'm gonna say. I think I just pretty much gave it away, but still worth checking out. I was still kind of surprised about the ending a little bit because there was so much going on. Since this book is not very long, you could probably get through it in like a day or a few hours. But some may complain that this is a little bit dry in some parts. So let me just get into who this is and isn't for. Who this is for. If you're interested in knowing kind of the background of steampunk and you love things like Arcane and you want to know more about how that came to be, I suggest reading this book as it is one of the first in the formal steampunk genre as we know it today. But it could be a bit dry in some places. There's a lot of philosophical back and forth. There's one segment where we are in a sewer trying to find the time machine, and there's a lot of talking going on. That segment went on for a long time, and for 200 pages that did slow it down significantly. So if you're not into something like that, or this is maybe a little bit too dry for you, totally understand. But if you are a fan of science fiction, steampunk specifically, and you like H.G. Wells, or at least the idea of H.G. Wells' work a la The Time Machine, then I suggest checking this out. So thank you so much for joining in with yet another book review and explanation. What are your guys' thoughts on K.W. Jeter's Morlock Night? Have you read it? Are you interested in reading it? Do you like steampunk? Let me know in the comments, and as usual, I will see you again next week for another video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and bye-bye.